Hello, my summit friends, not summer friends, because we're friends forever. It's so good to be back with you this week. I've had an incredible week this past week. I was blessed to do some traveling. I was in Atlanta at a Catholic high school for a spiritual reflection day. I was in the Diocese of Richmond, Virginia for their diocesan youth conference. And I capped it all off at Mount St. Mary University for their youth rally. And you know what I learned? Jesus Christ is alive, the gospel is still good, and Jesus wins. So all that in mind, let's dive into the readings this week because there's some really cool stuff going on here. First reading from the book of Sirach. Now, Sirach is not going to be found in your Protestants, brothers and sisters Bibles. This is a book that was originally included in the canon of Scripture and then around the Reformation, because it wasn't originally written in Hebrew, was taken out. But we've still got it, and there's some great wisdom here. In fact, it's from the wisdom tradition. It says, if you trust in God, you too shall live. He has set before you fire and water, to whichever you choose, stretch forth your hand. Before man are life and death, good and evil. Whichever he chooses shall be given him. We start this week's readings by talking about the reality that we make choices, whether or not to obey God's law, to make a choice for life or for death. And this comes back up in the Psalm. So this week in the Psalm, we're going to say, blessed are they who follow the law of the Lord. But then by the time we get to the gospel, and this one's coming from the Gospel of Matthew, in the Sermon on the Mount, which has some of Jesus' most famous teachings, we are going to hear, what does that mean to follow the law? What does it mean to choose life over death? Now, people had the idea that you needed to follow the law to a T. And some people are saying, Jesus, are you going to maybe abolish the law? Are you bringing a new teaching in? And Jesus clears that up by saying, I haven't come to abolish the law. I haven't come to not even like a part of one of the letters written have I come to abolish. I have come to fulfill it. But here's what Jesus means when he talks about fulfilling it. Let me ask you this question. Have you ever had a situation where you knew the right thing to do, but you did just that, and you didn't go above and beyond? Like, hey, treat your brother and sister with respect, And you're like, fine, I'm not going to punch them in the face. I'm not going to say unkind words about them, but I'm also not going to go out of my way to do something good for them, to help them with their homework, to pitch in around the house, to even maybe stand up for them in school if they're close to me in grade and I know that they're having a difficult time. You see, there's a way that we cannot sin, but still not do the right thing. And that's what Jesus starts to talk about in this week's gospel. So he goes through some actually famous teachings you may have heard before, where this is where he's going to say, or he's saying, if you have something against your brother, reconcile. This is where he's going to say to people, if your right eye causes you to sin, cut it out. Everybody who looks at a woman with adultery, you look at a person with lust, you commit adultery. These are where these teachings come from. Jesus is saying it's not just enough to not do something. Think about that. It's not enough to not do something. We have to go above and beyond. I think sometimes we can get really legalist as Christians, and this week's gospel should convict us. Well, I don't do the wrong things. I'm not doing anything really bad. I haven't killed anybody. I'm not committing adultery. Maybe I'm not committing any sort of serious sins. But we have to ask ourselves, am I doing what is called of me to love my neighbor? That's the challenge laid out, and that's the challenge of life and death that sets before us. We can choose not death, but that doesn't mean we're choosing life. We can choose to avoid sin, but that doesn't mean we're actually fulfilling the law, which causes us to not just avoid sin, but to go above and beyond and to live what is actually undergirding the law, which is to love our neighbor as ourselves. We've all heard this before, but how difficult is it to do? Now, the gospel this week is a longer reading, so you may get a shortened version at your parish for time constraints or whatever. If you get the shortened version, trust me, you'll know if it's the shortened version or it's the long version. If you get the shortened version, go and read this week's gospel. It's Matthew chapter 5, verses 17 through 37. So 20 verses. You want to read through all of this because this is where Jesus is going to tell you, and this is the key line, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Now, the scribes and Pharisees, righteous people, but not living the fulfillment of the law of love like you and I can. So that's the challenge this week. Live the law of love, avoid sin, but then don't just simply avoid sin, actively engage in the love of neighbor and find ways, do whatever it takes to do it. That's the key line that I love out of the longer version is this whole, and it's famous, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. That's the extremes that Jesus wants you to go to not only avoid sin, but to find ways to love other people, to go above and beyond, even to what seems like an extreme. So live the law of love this week, friends. Enjoy the rest of your week. Do something good for somebody that goes above and beyond. And we'll see you all right back here next week on Summit.